The courthouse doors closed behind Elena Rivera with a hollow thud that echoed longer than it should have. For a moment, she stood at the top of the wide stone steps, clutching the thin folder that held the official proof of her freedom. The sky above was a dull, overcast gray, neither threatening rain nor offering sunlight, perfectly undecided, just like her heart. 3 years of marriage, reduced to stamped pages and polite signatures. She had expected relief to come rushing in, dramatic and powerful. Instead, there was only a strange calm, like the silence after a storm when you're not yet sure what's been destroyed. Adrian hadn't been cruel during the divorce. That almost made it worse. No shouting, no accusations, just two people slowly admitting they no longer knew how to speak the same language. Elena pulled her coat tighter and descended the steps alone. Her new apartment was smaller than the life she'd left behind, but it was hers. No echoing hallways, no staff moving quietly around her, no glass walls that made her feel like a decorative object in someone else's empire. She set her keys on the kitchen counter and leaned there for a long moment, breathing in the faint scent of fresh paint and something comforting, possibility. The first wave of nausea hit her that evening. It came suddenly, sharp and disorienting, sending her rushing to the sink. She blamed the courthouse coffee, the stress, the emotional exhaustion she'd been carrying for months. After all, endings did strange things to the body. She rinsed her mouth, splashed water on her face, and promised herself a better night's sleep. But the nausea returned the next morning. And the next. Meetings became endurance tests. Smells felt louder. Time slowed in the early hours, stretching each minute into something heavy and unfamiliar. Elena started keeping crackers in her bag, nibbling them like a secret. She told herself she was overreacting, that this was just her body recalibrating after the chaos of divorce. Still, a quiet voice inside her refused to be ignored. On a Friday afternoon, she walked 3 extra blocks past her usual pharmacy to one where the clerk wouldn't recognize her name. The bell over the door chimed too loudly as she stepped inside. Her hands shook slightly as she picked the test from the shelf, hiding it beneath a pack of gum like a teenager sneaking candy. At home, the bathroom felt too small, the air too thick. She sat on the edge of the tub, staring at the instructions as if they were written in another language. Her heart pounded so loudly she was sure the neighbors could hear it. When the timer beeped, she almost laughed, short, breathless, at how terrified she was of a tiny piece of plastic. 2 lines, clear, unmistakable. The world narrowed to that moment. Elena pressed a hand over her mouth, tears blurring her vision. Fear surged first, hot, immediate, overwhelming. Then wonder followed, softer but just as powerful. A life, a beginning. Inside her, Adrian's face flashed in her mind without invitation. His calm authority, his world of glass towers and endless expectations. She imagined lawyers, headlines, strategic conversations disguised as concern. Her chest tightened. No, she whispered to the empty room. Not like that. She made her decision before doubt could talk her out of it. She would keep this to herself, for now. Not as an act of revenge or bitterness, but as protection. She needed time to understand what this meant without anyone else shaping the narrative. Days turned into careful routines. She learned which foods settled her stomach and which smells sent her retreating. She chose clothes that draped instead of clung. In the mirror, she practiced looking normal, unremarkable, unchanged. At night, when the city quieted, Elena lay in bed with one hand resting over her stomach. The apartment was silent, but she felt less alone than she had in months. "I've got you," she whispered, unsure whether she was reassuring the baby, or herself. Outside, life moved on. Adrian Blackwood's name still filled business pages and social feeds, but Elena scrolled past them without stopping. She told herself the past was closed. She didn't yet know that some endings had a way of reopening, quietly, and at exactly the wrong moment. Adrian Blackwood had mastered the art of appearing unshaken. Markets crashed, deals collapsed, rivals plotted, but his expression rarely changed. That morning was no different. He stepped out of his car in front of the private medical clinic, tailored coat immaculate, phone pressed to his ear as he finalized a call about a delayed acquisition. His voice was calm, precise, the sound of a man used to being obeyed. Yet beneath the surface, something restless stirred. The clinic was quiet, designed for discretion. Soft lighting, Neutral colors. A place where powerful people could exist without scrutiny. Adrian ended his call and approached the reception desk, offering a brief nod. The receptionist smiled, distracted, fingers flying over the keyboard. "Mr. Blackwood, please take a seat. We'll call you shortly," she said, handing him a clipboard without really looking at it. He took it automatically and moved toward the seating area. As he sat, he finally glanced down. Habit, nothing more. The name at the top of the form stopped him cold. Elena Rivera. For a second, his mind refused to process it. The letters looked familiar, too familiar, as if his thoughts had summoned them. His grip tightened on the clipboard. He told himself it had to be coincidence. Rivera wasn't an uncommon name. Elena wasn't either. Then his eyes dropped lower. The address. The one he'd helped her pick after the separation. A quiet building, away from cameras and noise. His chest tightened. Adrian swallowed hard and scanned the rest of the page before he could stop himself. His eyes landed on a single bolded line, clinical and unforgiving in its simplicity. Test type. Pregnancy confirmation. The air seemed to leave his lungs all at once. 1,000 thoughts collided in his head. Timelines, memories, late nights, and spoken moments near the end of their marriage. His heartbeat thundered in his ears, a sharp contrast to the calm music playing overhead. Pregnant. Elena was pregnant. His first instinct was denial. A mistake. A clerical error. Another woman with the same name and address. Impossible, but his mind clung to the idea like a lifeline. He looked up, scanning the waiting room, half expecting to see her there, to confirm or shatter the reality in front of him. She wasn't. The receptionist suddenly frowned and hurried over. "Oh, I'm so sorry, Mr. Blackwood. That clipboard isn't yours." Adrian stood at once and handed it back, his face already a mask of polite indifference. "No problem," he said smoothly. But his hands were cold. He sat down again, this time staring straight ahead, jaw tight. The appointment he'd come for faded into irrelevance. His mind replayed every moment of the last months of their marriage, searching for signs he'd missed. Had she known before the divorce? Or had this happened after, some cruel twist of timing? When his name was finally called, he rose, completed his visit on autopilot, and left the clinic without speaking to anyone more than necessary. Outside, the city felt too loud. In his car, Adrian sat motionless, hands gripping the steering wheel. The rational part of him took control, the part that had built an empire. He didn't act on emotion. He gathered facts. By evening, a discreet investigator had confirmed what his instincts already knew. The appointment was real, the date recent, the probability undeniable. Elena was pregnant, and she hadn't told him. Anger flared, sharp and immediate, followed by something deeper and more unsettling. Fear, not of scandal or headlines, but of absence. Of a child growing without him even knowing their first heartbeat. He drove without thinking, ending up on her street. He didn't park. He didn't go inside. He simply slowed as he passed her building, eyes lifting to the windows. One light was on. For a fleeting second, he imagined her inside, curled on the couch, maybe tired, maybe smiling softly at something he couldn't see. His chest ached with the image. He could confront her, demand answers. He had the power to do that. Instead, he drove away. Back in his penthouse, the silence felt oppressive. The city glittered below, but it offered no comfort. For the first time in years, Adrian allowed himself to sit with the truth without trying to control it. A child wasn't a deal to negotiate. And Elena wasn't an opponent. He opened his phone, typed her name, then erased it. Whatever came next couldn't be rushed. This discovery had changed everything. Elena sensed something was coming long before the knock. The evening had been too quiet, the kind of stillness that made the air feel heavy. She moved slowly around her apartment, tidying things that didn't need tidying, her hand drifting unconsciously to her stomach as if to shield it. The rain tapped gently against the windows, and somewhere below, a car door slammed shut. Then came the knock. It was firm but hesitant, a sound that carried familiarity and unease all at once. Elena's heart stuttered. For a moment, she considered pretending she wasn't home. But something in her chest told her running would only make things worse. She opened the door. Adrian stood there, taller than she remembered, or maybe the distance between them made him seem that way. His dark coat was damp with rain, hair slightly mussed, his usual polished confidence replaced by something raw and uncertain. When their eyes met, time seemed to stretch. "Hi," he said quietly. Her throat tightened. "You shouldn't be here." "I know," he replied. "But I needed to see you." The words trembled on the edge of something dangerous. Elena stepped aside despite herself, allowing him in. The door clicked shut behind them, sealing the moment. They stood in the small living room, surrounded by half-packed boxes and mismatched furniture. It was nothing like the penthouse they once shared. Adrian took it in silently, his gaze lingering on the simplicity, the intimacy of the space. "How did you find out?" Elena asked, arms crossing protectively over her chest. Adrian didn't hesitate. "The clinic," he said. "There was a mistake. I saw a form." Her breath hitched. The careful secret she'd guarded so fiercely suddenly felt fragile, exposed. Anger surged up, hot and defensive. "That was private," she said. "You had no right to know." "You're right," Adrian said immediately. "And I'm sorry. I wasn't looking. But once I knew, I couldn't pretend I didn't." Silence settled between them, thick with unspoken history. Elena turned away, pressing her fingers into the edge of the kitchen counter. "I wasn't planning to tell you," she said. The confession came out steadier than she felt. "At least not yet." "Why?" Adrian asked softly. She laughed, short and humorless. "You really need to ask." He didn't interrupt as she spoke. About the pressure of being married to a man whose life was always public. About every decision becoming a negotiation. About how exhausted she'd been, how small she'd felt by the end. "I needed something that was just mine," she said, voice cracking. "Just for a little while." Adrian closed his eyes briefly, absorbing the truth. When he looked at her again, there was no anger there, only regret. "I never wanted you to feel trapped. But I did," she said. "And I couldn't risk feeling that again. Not with a child." The words hung between them, fragile and sharp. He nodded slowly. "I'm not here to take anything from you," he said. "I'm here because I want to be there. If you'll let me." She turned back to face him, really face him. "You can't just decide that now," she said. "You don't get to rewrite the past." "I know," Adrian replied. "I can't fix what I broke. But I can choose what I do next." Elena sank onto the couch, the weight of the day pressing down on her. Adrian remained standing for a moment, then sat at the far end, leaving space between them. It was a small gesture, but it mattered. "I'm scared," Elena admitted. "All the time." "So am I," he said. The admission surprised them both. Adrian leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I don't want lawyers or contracts or headlines involved. I just want to know how you're feeling. What you need." Tears slipped down Elena's cheeks before she could stop them. She didn't wipe them away. "I don't know yet," she whispered. "I just know I can't do this alone." "You won't," Adrian said, his voice steady. "Not if I have anything to say about it." She studied him, really studied him. The man who once seemed untouchable now looked vulnerable, human. For the first time since the divorce, she felt something shift inside her. Not forgiveness, not certainty, but possibility. And for now, that was enough. They didn't fall back into each other's lives as if nothing had happened. What followed wasn't a reunion, but a careful reconstruction, slow, deliberate, and often uncomfortable. Elena insisted on boundaries, and to Adrian's credit, he respected them without argument. He didn't move her into the penthouse. He didn't assign assistants or drivers. When he offered help, it came in the form of quiet presence, not solutions. At first, Elena didn't know what to do with that. The first prenatal appointment they attended together was awkward. Adrian arrived early and stood when she entered, unsure whether to hug her or keep his distance. Elena chose a seat beside him, close enough to acknowledge the change, far enough to protect herself. When the doctor spoke and the steady rhythm of the baby's heartbeat filled the room, Adrian's breath caught audibly. Elena watched his reaction from the corner of her eye. The awe on his face was unguarded, almost boyish. That was when she began to believe him. He started showing up in small ways. Text messages asking how she felt. Grocery deliveries with foods she'd mentioned once, weeks ago. When nausea hit hard one afternoon, he sat on her kitchen floor with her, saying nothing, just staying until it passed. The world, of course, didn't stay quiet for long. A blurry photo surfaced online. Adrian outside Alina's building. Speculation followed within hours. Reporters called. Investors whispered. Elena braced herself for the storm she'd feared from the beginning. But it never came. Instead, Adrian released a short statement through his legal team. No denial, no spin, just a simple acknowledgement of a personal matter and a request for privacy. Then he disappeared from public events. Board meetings were delegated, galas unattended. Elena watched this shift from a distance, stunned. This was a man who had once chosen timing over tenderness, optics over honesty. And now, for the first time, he was choosing differently. They prepared for the baby together, but on her terms. The nursery took shape in Alina's apartment, not his. Soft neutral colors, warm light, a second-hand rocking chair she'd fallen in love with. Adrian assembled furniture himself, sleeves rolled up, frowning at instructions like they were the hardest problem he'd ever faced. One evening, as they folded impossibly small clothes, Elena felt a sudden, sharp flutter. She froze. Adrian, she whispered. He looked up instantly. What is it? She took his hand and placed it gently against her stomach. Wait. They stood there, barely breathing. Then it happened again. A clear, unmistakable kick. Adrian's eyes widened, then filled with tears he didn't bother to hide. Hey, he murmured, voice breaking. I'm here. Something inside Elena softened. She realized she wasn't holding her breath anymore. Later that night, after Adrian had gone, Elena lay in bed replaying the day. She thought about the woman she'd been during the marriage, careful, accommodating, afraid of rocking the boat. This version of herself felt stronger. Not because life was easier, but because she trusted her own voice. Weeks passed. Conversations grew easier. Laughter returned in small, unexpected moments. They talked about names, about co-parenting, about what they wanted their child to learn about love and resilience. They didn't promise forever, but one quiet afternoon, sitting together in the nursery as sunlight spilled across the floor, Elena turned to Adrian and said, I'm glad you found out. Even if it wasn't the way I planned. He smiled, gentle and honest. I'm glad you chose yourself first. The future was still uncertain. But it no longer felt like something to fear. This time, it felt like a beginning they were choosing, together, carefully, and without hiding.